Hi, my name is Usman. I'm a photographer at Sonder Creative and staff writer at fstoppers.com, and today I'm comparing the 17mm tilt shift from Canon versus the 12mm f2.8 lens from Laowa with the magic shift adapter. Now the magic shift adapter is quite an interesting thing from Laowa because what it does is it allows you to use pretty much any lens and get shift features with it. Now it does crop the lens to about 1.4, 1.5 times and you will lose one stop of light. However, you are able to use it relatively effectively for architectural photography. So a bunch of people were asking me, how does the Laowa lens with the magic shift adapter compare to the 17? Because the focal length and the aperture are very similar when you put the adapter on, and a number of people wanted to see if it's a good, viable and cheaper alternative to the 17. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to mention before we get into this, and the first thing is that the Laowa lens doesn't have any electronic contact, so you are gonna be able to, you're not going to be able to change the aperture from the camera. You have to use the aperture ring. Not a major issue for a lot of architectural photographers because we tend to shoot manual anyway, so it's not a problem in that sense. However, the magic shift adapter doesn't have any electronic contacts either, so using it with other lenses might be a little bit tricky. You need to use a couple of techniques in order to use the aperture control on any other lens. But Laowa lens, manual ring aperture, so perfectly fine in that sense. Build quality wise, build quality is surprisingly good on the Laowa lens. I was genuinely surprised at how well it's been built. It's a relatively cheap lens, about £850, but solidly made. I mean, incredible construction, really well designed. Even the lens hood is solid metal. I'm very pleased with how well this lens has been made. Magic shift adapter, same thing, very good in terms of construction. Everything feels well thought out. Now in terms of dimensions, the Laowa lens is taller and heavier than 17 tilt shift, but it is a slimmer lens compared to the 17mm. The Laowa lens does come with a lens hood, which is useful. 17 tilt shift, you can't put a lens hood on it, and it's got that massive front element, so it's going to capture flares from every direction. I don't know if you watched my last video where I compared it to the 24 tilt shift. You'll know that the flaring is not great on the 17 tilt shift. Laowa lens, flaring's okay, and the lens hood does help a little bit, but I didn't really test that extensively. Now we're going to look at a few images and compare both of the images and results you get from the 12mm and the 17 tilt shift. However, first I just want to show you the angle of view that you get with the 12mm without any adapters. I think it's quite incredible how wide you can actually shoot. So looking at this image over here, you can see that the 12mm lens, you get this incredibly wide angle of view, and then if we just shift over to the 17mm, you can see how much you're cropping in. Anyway, let's move on to Lightroom. I've got the images opened up. Let's do a little pixel peeping, see what kind of results you get, and maybe this can help you decide which one is going to be better for you. So here we have the images opened up in Lightroom. First image over here, Canon 5 DSLR with the 17mm tilt shift. Second image over here is the Canon 5 DSLR with the 12mm lens from Laowa. Obviously, it doesn't report the actual lens because it doesn't have any electronic contacts. Now the thing I need to mention is that doing an apples to apples comparison between these two lenses is a little bit tricky, and the reason is that when you put the 17 tilt shift on the A7R3 with an adapter, the corners are a little bit softer than what the actual lens is capable of, and also the Laowa lens with the magic shift adapter doesn't work on the Canon 5 DSLR, so bit of an unfair comparison to some extent because I'm going back and forth between cameras, but I do compare both of them on the A7R3, and I also go back and forth between the A7R3 and the 5 DSLR. So not precisely an apples to apples comparison, but it's close enough in terms of allowing you to decide how both of these lenses perform. So for this first comparison, let's look at the 17 tilt shift on the A7R3 versus the 12mm with the magic shift on the A7R3. So let's put these side by side, and you might be able to see that there's a slight difference in terms of angle of view. The 12mm lens has, it's not exactly 17, I think it's a little bit longer than 17mm. The 17 tilt shift on the A7R3 is a little bit wider in terms of angle of view because it's just getting a little bit on the edges over here, as you can see, and maybe a little bit on the bottom. Actually no, bottom I think it's about fine, but the edges you're definitely getting a little bit more on the 17 tilt shift. Not a major issue, but just something to note. So zooming in 1:1 into the center, and in terms of sharpness, I don't see that much of a difference. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. The 17 tilt shift does have a little bit more contrast, so that's something to note. However, in terms of sharpness and detail, they're both very, very, very close. And I think that might be a little bit of dust on the sensor creeping in there. Colors wise, the 17 tilt shift is a little bit more accurate. The building is not as green and warm as it is in this image. Both of them are at the exact same white balance of 5500, same camera, so this is obviously just coming from the lens and the adapter. And I'm just going to move on to this section over here, and you might be able to notice that there's a tiny bit of chromatic aberration compared to the Laowa lens. Now, profiles have been added to both of these images in Lightroom, so when you go into the profile corrections, I'll just quickly go over here, you can see that I have clicked the remove chromatic aberration on both images. Now if you remove that, you are going to notice that there's significantly more chromatic aberration in the 17 tilt shift than there is in the Laowa lens with the magic shift adapter. So you'll notice how much more that is. I'm just going to put them side by side again. So you'll see that the Laowa lens has noticeably less chromatic aberrations compared to the 17 tilt shift, and the reason for this is because the magic shift adapter is actually really good at reducing those chromatic aberrations. And going to the edge of the frame here, I mean, a bit of an unfair comparison because I am using an adapter on the 17 tilt shift, so it does get softer on the A7R III, but you can see a little bit of flaring there. But obviously the time, the clouds were moving, so not a fair comparison in that sense. But the Laowa lens is sharper on the A7R III in the corners compared to the 17 tilt shift, and even on the edges of the frame it's just slightly sharper. Not a major difference, but it is noticeable in terms of the performance. However, the 17 tilt shift will obviously perform better on a native camera like the Canon 5DSR. And just to show the performance with the 17 tilt shift on the 5DSR, this is again not an apples to apples comparison, but just something so that you can see how they perform. Center sharpness, relatively similar in terms of what it was. Again, still a little bit more contrast, and colors wise it's a little bit more accurate, but then again the lighting is a little bit different too, so that could be playing a part in this as well. The clouds were moving, so lighting was changing quite dramatically. Once again, chromatic aberrations a little bit more on the 17 tilt shift, and when you start using on a native camera you can see that the edges are much sharper than what they were. And we'll just go on to this side where we were looking before. You can see that the edge is significantly sharper than it was on the Sony A7R III. You can see a lot more detail over here. Corner wise, however, still a little bit softer compared to the Laowa lens. So the Laowa lens is very good in terms of performance. Now, of course, looking at a single image and seeing the performance between these two lenses is one thing. However, these are shift lenses, so I'm assuming that a lot of people want to see what they're like right to the edges of the frame and what kind of performance you're going to get. So I did do a panorama with both of these lenses on the A7R III. Not perfectly fair for the 17 tilt shift, but it should give you an idea of how they perform. So we're just going to look at the panorama and see what kind of performance you get with both of these lenses. So here we have the panoramas, and immediately you might be able to see that the angle of view or the amount of shift features available on the 17 tilt shift is much noticeably greater than there is on the Laowa lens. So the angle of view, as you can see over here, if you look at the edge over here, both of these windows are missing on the Laowa image, but they're there on the 17 tilt shift, because you can shift a little bit more on the 17mm as opposed to the magic shift adapter. It's not a massive amount, but it is a noticeable amount, especially if you need to get that extra little bit of the building in. The 17 tilt shift is just going to be a little bit better in that regard. Now you are getting darker corners on both of these combinations. So 17 tilt shift, the corners are noticeably darker, and the Laowa lens, again, you are getting a darker image as well. Once again, colors wise, I think this is going to be a little bit fairer in terms of comparing the colors. The Laowa lens is is a little bit warmer compared to the 17 tilt shift, so this is just a little bit colder. I'd say that this is again a little bit more accurate in terms of colors, because this is what I remember the colors to be like in the clouds. They were just a little bit grayer. They were more bluey gray as opposed to greeny gray. So the 17 tilt shift is more accurate, does have a little bit more contrast as well. If we start zooming in, this is what I focused over here around near the center. If we start looking at the center sharpness between both of these lenses, they're very, very close. You can't really, I'm not going to say one is better than the other. This one, again, you've still got a little bit more contrast, but the sharpness is very, very similar. Moving right to the edge of the frame, and the Laowa lens is again sharper on the A7R III. Once again, not a fair comparison to the 17 tilt shift because I'm using an adapter, but you are obviously going to use this only on the A7R III, so you can see even right to the edge, very, very sharp. You're getting incredible detail from this combination. It's a very, very good performer. I mean, even look at the tree. Once again, not a fair comparison to the 17 tilt shift. This is just to demonstrate how they perform on the A7R III. And looking at the other edge on this side, this is a little bit softer than the right hand side. However, it's still noticeably sharper than the 17 tilt shift on the A7R III. So there you have it. That's how both lenses compare to one another when it comes to sheer detail and resolution. Both are incredible. However, the Laowa lens is a fantastic performer. I'm very, very impressed with how well this lens works, especially on the A7R III or an E-mount camera. If you're looking to get into architectural photography and you've got an E-mount camera, the Laowa lens is actually a better option purely because on the edges it's going to be sharper. This is not to say that the 17mm lens is worse, it's just that with an adapter it performs worse on the Sony cameras. And that's why the Laowa lens is a better option. Center sharpness, they're basically identical, and also it has less chromatic aberrations, which makes it a very, very compelling option. And at about half the price, I think that I highly, highly recommend this. For architectural photographers, yes, it doesn't have the tilt feature that the 17mm lens does, and it's not something I use very often, but if you're shooting interiors or landscapes and you want more in focus, you're just changing where the plane of focus is, but that can be quite useful because you can shoot at wider apertures and get a different plane of focus. Actually quite useful in some regard. Not a major issue because it's not something that I use very often, but for those of you who do, you might want to go on to the 17 tilt shift for that. Aside from that, I'd say that there were a few issues with the Magic Shift adapter. First thing is that it doesn't have any electronic contacts, and I know I mentioned that earlier, but it's still a problem because you don't have any ability to control the aperture on any other lens, and also there's no way to report what the lens is in Lightroom or Capture One. Obviously you'll know what it is, but there's no profile, there's no reporting what the lens is. It just shows as Sony A7R III or Canon 5DSR. The thing that I didn't like about the Magic Shift adapter is the fact that when you're shifting the lens, it does slip, so you need to have both hands on the lens. With the 17 tilt shift, however, it doesn't move. Even when you loosen the knob completely, this lens is completely stable. Construction wise, 17 tilt shift is just a little bit better in that regard. Now you might be thinking, you know, why is that relevant? Well, the reason why I find it relevant, or the reason why I think this is a bit of an important issue, is that if you're creating panoramas or if you're shifting the lens and you don't want the composition to change, using two hands on a camera opens up more risk to movement in the camera than just using one hand. Just that little thing that makes a bit of a may cause a bit of a problem. Other than that, I'd say incredible option for anyone who's looking to use the Sony A7 cameras. Highly recommend it. Just want to give a massive thank you to Laowa for giving me this opportunity to review their lens and the Magic Shift adapter. Very thankful for the opportunity. Also, a huge thank you to B&H for helping me make this video. Once again, their support has been really appreciated. I really do appreciate the help that they're giving me. If you have any comments, suggestions, leave them below. I will try and get back to you as soon as possible. Also, follow me on F-Stoppers. Check out my page. I mean, I'm writing articles there regularly, so make sure you're following me on F-Stoppers so you can get the latest in terms of news. And also hit the like button, subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you.